When you came into this world, there gradually arose into being the sensation of I. And it stays there a while, it goes through a development, and then it drops off. But all the time, everywhere, there are other I's starting up. See? Whether they be human, animal, anything you like. They be in other galaxies, etc. Always, they're starting up. Now, you would say, is there no connection between them? No, in the same way there is no connection between the molecules in your hand. And yet you say it is a hand. But if you look at it under a powerful enough microscope, the molecules in your hand are miles apart. And you would say there's no connection between them. What's the connection between this galaxy and other galaxies? Well, we can't see any connection. And yet there are gravitational swings whereby they respond to each other and move in a certain collective order. So in a very similar way, the constant appearance of beings who feel that they are I constitute a wave motion. You can see it either way. You can see yourself, in other words, as existing only now. That's the only you there is. The alternative to that, logically, is to see yourself as everything. So everybody is involved in playing the game of life in a way that goes beyond play and becomes deadly serious. And as a result, the whole of existence is lived in a state of constant frustration, because you are trying all the time to hold together and to preserve something which in the long run can't be preserved at all. And therefore, in response to this cry of pain, which everybody puts up as a result of being in this situation, of trying to hold on to things, the wisdom of the various ways of liberation, be they Hindu, Buddhist, or whatever, is saying to everybody, look now, cool it, wake up. This is the kind of thing that's going on, and you are not a captive in a trap. You're not just some mere little measly being that somehow or other was brought into an insane universe. But you are what the thing is. You are not the victim. You are the system. Only you have identified yourself with a one wave in it. That is to say, a particular accumulation of memories, of associations, of skills, of things that you've learned. And you don't want to let go of them, because you found in that accumulation of memories, which you call yourself, an identity. So you know where you are, or think you do. But actually, you don't need to be anywhere. Where is the universe? Think up an answer to that one. And so the question, where is the universe, is really ultimately the same question as where are you? And so what this is saying is, look, let go. It's all right to play the game, be involved, work out the various intrigues, problems, creative projects, and so on that life involves. That's fine. But if you get involved in it so that you're hung up, this deprives you of delight and joy in playing the game. So the point is to get people unhung up on the whole thing. No point of view is the right one. Infinitely many points of view are possible. But if you take a point of view and you insist that's the only point of view, then you're hung up on it. So long as you insist that black is black and white is white, and that there are Republicans and Democrats and capitalists and communists and good guys and bad guys, it's a hang-up. So also between what is you and what is other than you. I would begin, you see, with the assumption that every person, every sentient being whatsoever, is I. I is simply the universe aware of itself at a particular place and time. That's what the word I means. And so the feeling that we call I is how everything feels on the inside. But it is always in a particular place at a particular time. And these particular places and particular times, they keep going on and on and on and on and on. Myriads of them, all over. And you feel that you are I just as much as I feel that I am I. And your I feeling and my I feeling are essentially the same. Only we're looking from different places. But it's all one I. Only we don't see this because we are hung up on the coming and going of I, on the particular circumstances in which every I appears. So because of our myopia, because our point of view is fascinated by the details and the differentiations between everything that's going on, the differentiations between people, the differentiations between generations, we are so preoccupied with that particular view of things that we're hung up on it. And we don't see that it's the same thing happening again and again and again. And that every I that comes into this world is you. all eyes are I. Wherever soever scattered, because you see, this is the place. At the point called here and now, this universe knows itself on the inside. You look around you, and you see everything, as it were, presenting an exterior to you. But my relationship to the other is always seeing life on the outside. However much I get down to the tiniest cells that constitute your nervous system, if I go down into the molecules, I go down into the atoms, I'm still regarding them from the outside. The only point at which I know the thing on the inside is where I am. Then I have inside knowledge of what everywhere else appears to be outside. So to realize inside, there must, of course, at the same time be outside. To realize self, there must be the counterbalance of other. Because it's like black and white, it's like back and front. They're inseparable. So then, this is where we start from. That every being coming into this world is I, and they keep on coming. Doesn't matter how long the intervals are between their appearances. Supposing this planet were completely wiped out, that would be the end of this race, in just the same way as, say, a group of insects will eat their food supply up on a plant, and the whole population will perish. Happens again and again. But it seems perfectly reasonable to suppose, in other words, that there is a constant rhythm of what we call consciousness, being awake to life, going on and on, just as stars go on and on. If the stars are going on all over the place, if galaxies are going on all over the place, it's equally reasonable to suppose that life is going on all over the place. And although the distances from our particular point of view between these islands of life may be vast, don't forget that the distances between the molecules in your own body are equally vast on their scale. Distance, space, isn't just removal. Space isn't just nothing. This is the grand delusion that space is somehow a thing to be ignored. This is very clearly explainable in terms of the Gestalt theory of perception. The Gestalt theory of perception is that we notice the figure and ignore the background. We notice what is a relatively small enclosed space and ignore the more dispersed. We notice what moves against what is relatively still, and what is relatively still is ignored. So likewise, when we get a constant stimulus of consciousness, we begin to ignore it and not to notice it. Consciousness tends always to notice novel things, novel changes in the environment. So the most unnoticed things in life are those which are the most constant and the most regular. And because you see, you lose touch with the most constant and the most regular things, you screen them out of your general thought as insignificant. They don't matter. They're not there. And the most ignored thing is space. Because space is always the background. The solids are the figures. And therefore we say, simply, space is just nothing. It may be filled around this planet for a little distance with air, which is important, but out there, space, that's nothing at all. And so we say that is nothing. But all that is saying is that that is the background to every figure. And as the figure cannot be there without the background, the solid cannot be there without the space. So the space of the world is the one thing we've forgotten. And the one thing that is absolutely essential to there being anything at all. So then, we must realize that what we call separate things, separate molecules, separate lives, separate planets, separate stars, separate galaxies, are joined by space. Space, in other words, is a relationship between solids. You would not be able to think about space without a relationship between solids. But so goes for everything. It is how it is spaced that creates the significance and interest of any being whatsoever. You say, for example, the human body consists of about 95 cents worth of chemicals. But how it's arranged. Playing a violin by a great master is just scraping cat's entrails with horsehair. But how it's done. See? So the order of the way things are distributed is the magic. What are we doing? You see, you've got a universe which you're living in, which is fundamentally wiggling, and you are an event in. This wiggle, see? Only you're trying to straighten it out. You're trying to see order in it. And your doing this is itself a wiggle. After all, you may say, one or two things in here are straight, you know? And it's their nature to go that way, to be orderly things, to be straight things, or whatever other quality you want to put on it. And we are like that. We are something in this which has it in its nature to arrange it this and that way, to want to see things straight. But actually, there really isn't anything in the whole arrangement that is the right way of doing it. And there isn't anything in life, in your life, that is supposed to happen. You're not supposed to live to be 80 or to die when you're 23. So, liberation is the realization there is no way that things are supposed to be. You are, you know, you're what there is. It's up to you to decide. See? But there's no way it has to happen. But on the other hand, if you want to feel that there is some way you would like to arrange this, I mean, we can start pushing these things around, you know, and put them in some kind of an order. That's okay, too. will be miserable to the degree that you are hung up on the notion that things should, must go a certain way. That is to say, to have a fixed view. If you have no fixed view, you remain elastic. And about this, there is always something that can't quite be said. When we say, I have no fixed view, it sounds as if I were just a non-entity, like a moron. But there's another sense of an empty mind than that. Not the moronic empty mind, but the lively empty mind. The empty mind that can either let it alone or project patterns onto it. And especially do both. So that instead of saying what you really ought to do is to project no pattern onto the world and realize that it's all fundamentally senseless, is to say always do both at the same time. Project the patterns, but realize at the same time there is no fixed view that you should take. This is exactly the same thing as being able to realize that there are rights and wrongs and things that should be done and should not be done. But at the same time, there's another point of view from which you can see that everything that happens is right the way it is, and that human life never makes an aesthetic mistake, just as the patterns of the clouds and of the foam never make aesthetic mistakes.
Now, I want to get down to the simplest possible nitty-gritty of what we've been talking about in a very easy way. To ask ourselves the question, quite fundamentally, what's all the trouble about? In other words, what is your state of mind when you contemplate the possibility of everything becoming nothing? All right, so the universe is a transitory system, like a bubble, like smoke, like foam on the water. And so, how easy? Just go along with it, dissolve. So, what's the problem? Why don't we want to give up? What do we think we're going to get by holding on and by resisting the dissolution? What I'm interested in for you to feel is, what do you really feel like inside at the prospect of there being nothing, of this whole thing being a bubble that dissolves? You see, about death, the reality of approaching death, people are apt to feel chilly, cold, lonely, scared because it's an unknown. The most frightening thing about death is there might be something beyond it, and you don't know what it is. The world is full of threats, mostly from other people. And there are monsters. There are all sorts of things which scare you, but beyond every monster is death. Dissolution is the end of it all. And so long as we can be scared of that, and so long as we can be made to think of death as a bad thing, we can be ruled. Because what end can it all come to? What's all the trouble about? The most it can come to is nothing. I mean, there may be some troubles on the way of resisting this, basically resisting it. And so in this resistance, there's an experience called pain. But beyond pain is annihilation. What will it be like to go to sleep and never wake up? Nobody can think about it. But what is that state when you're teased out of thought? This is not, as you would fantasize it, a state of being in the dark forever. It is not like being buried alive, because then there's an experience of darkness. Now, so, when you really think about nothingness, it becomes like how your head looks to your eyes. And behind the eyes, you don't see darkness, do you? You're not aware of a contrast of light here, black there. Behind the visual field, there is simply nothing conceivable at all, neither darkness nor light. So, might one venture to say almost that that area of blankness we call death is what lies behind the eyes. In other words, it is what we can't think about that's what's watching.